At my dad's celebration dinner, I handed him a custom-made watch with the inscription, "Time to enjoy what you've built." He scoffed and said, "Shame you'll never build anything worthwhile yourself." I picked it back up, nodded, and left. Overnight, I reversed my investment in the family business. By morning, they were locked out of their bank portal. Then, my phone lit up. 81 missed calls. It was only the beginning. What hit me first wasn't his words. It was how no one reacted to them. Just silence. A little awkward shuffling. Someone cleared their throat. And that was it. Like his selfishness was just part of the scenery. Something we'd all learned to step around. I had just handed him the custom-made watch. The kind of thing you don't buy lightly. Walnut face, brushed titanium band, subtle but solid, and on the back I had it engraved, "Time to enjoy what you've built." I had the idea months ago he was officially retiring, stepping back from the business, or so he said, and I wanted it to be a moment. A bridge, maybe. He opened the box, gave it a glance, and then said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Shame you'll never build anything worthwhile yourself." There was a beat of silence, but it wasn't surprise. It was the usual discomfort that followed whenever he said something cruel, and no one knew whether to laugh or change the subject. My mom looked down at her plate. My cousin Janie suddenly became very interested in the wine list. My uncle stared at the salt shaker like it had something important to say, and no one defended me. No one even reacted. Just a few half smiles, and the usual unspoken agreement to let it slide. That was the real slap in the face. I reached across the table, took the watch back, closed the box, and put it in my coat pocket. Then I stood up, straightened my sleeves, and left. No scene, no yelling, just done. I drove around for almost an hour. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. That kind of quiet realization that hits you when you finally accept that something's never going to change. I thought about the envelope in my glove box. The $600 I'd withdrawn earlier that morning. Crisp bills in a clean red envelope. I was going to give it to him privately. Just a personal thank you for everything he'd done over the years. But sitting at a red light on 9th Street, I pulled the envelope out, stared at it for a while, then tossed it into my briefcase. I wouldn't be handing that over. I'd also sunk $1,500 into fixing up the family house, the one my dad always insisted was the legacy. I paid for the new porch, the plumbing repairs, even redid the kitchen tiles myself on the weekends. No one thanked me. Not once. Just a passing comment from my mom a week ago about how it's about time that place stopped looking like a shed. Back home, I poured a coffee and sat at my desk. The house was quiet. I pulled up the business management dashboard. I'd been preparing for this for a while. The family business had technically been mine and Dad's for a decade, but most of the back-end structure had gradually shifted into my hands, quietly, carefully. A year ago, I started building out an alternate structure, a holding company that could quietly absorb the assets. I had controlling shares in my name spread across 2 entities, one of which my father had signed off on without reading. I didn't touch the money yet. I just cut access. B3, 30 a met. The admin credentials were reset. The security layers were updated. The bank portal was disconnected from his devices by 4. 00. The company accountant was locked out of everything. Only I had the keys. And then I slept. B6, 30 a metr. My phone started buzzing on the nightstand. At first I ignored it, but then it didn't stop. I finally checked it. 81 missed calls that told me everything I needed to know. He had figured it out. What he didn't know, at least not yet, was that this was only the beginning. By the time I got to the office the next morning, the silence felt heavier than usual. The receptionist gave me this wide-eyed look like I'd walked in wearing a ski mask and holding a crowbar. I could already feel the shift. People didn't know what had happened yet, but they knew something had. Greg was pacing outside my office. He looked wired and exhausted at the same time. His shirt was half untucked, and he had his phone in one hand like it had been glued there all night. He didn't wait for me to unlock the door. Just followed me in the second I opened it. "Wilma," he said. shutting the door behind us. Tell me this is some kind of glitch. I sat down, opened my laptop, and checked the systems again. Everything was exactly how I left it. I'd rerouted administrative control, shifted our main holding account to the alternate structure I'd set up months ago, and revoked every single digital key tied to my father. It's not a glitch, I said. Greg stared at me. He wasn't shocked, just disappointed or maybe just tired. He's losing it, he said. He called me at 5 a.m., screaming, drove to the bank in his pajamas. He should have worn a suit, I said. Might have looked more professional when they told him he doesn't represent the business anymore. Greg exhaled. Jesus, Wilma, what happened last night? I didn't want to explain, but I knew he'd hear the version from everyone else soon enough, so I told him about the dinner, the watch, the insult, the silence when I finished. He shook his head slowly. He said that in front of everyone? I didn't respond. I just handed him the box from my bag, the watch. He read the inscription on the back. Time to enjoy what you've built. His face dropped a little. You really meant it. Yeah, I said. I really did. I spent the rest of the morning in meetings while my phone buzzed nonstop. My dad was trying to access everything, banking, payroll, client contracts, all denied. It confirmed multiple attempts from his IP. I locked those down too. If he wanted to come after me, I wasn't going to leave any windows open. At 11:48, my mom started texting. Please call your father. Whatever happened, we can fix this. He didn't mean it like that, Wilma. You know how he is. I didn't answer. Then the call started. She called 6 times in a row. I ignored them all. At 1:15, she showed up at the office. Greg gave me a heads up through the glass, but before I could do anything, she was already at my door. She looked small, not weak, just tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Like the years of covering for him were finally cracking through her skin. Can I sit? She asked. I nodded. She sat down, clasped her hands in her lap, and looked at me like she didn't know where to start. Your father's panicking. He hasn't slept. He thinks this is all a mistake. It's not, I said. He said some things last night that he shouldn't have said. Yeah. In front of the entire family. She didn't argue with that, didn't excuse it. That surprised me more than anything. He wants to meet, just the 3 of us tonight. He said he's ready to talk. I stared at her for a moment. Will he apologize? She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. I'm not showing up so he can give me another lecture. It's not a lecture. He knows you're serious. He's scared. Then let him say 3 words. He's never apologized in his life. That's the problem, I said. She looked at me like I was being cruel, but I wasn't. I was just done. I had spent years fixing his mistakes, covering his debts, taking on the stress while he soaked in the credit. I built the infrastructure that kept the business profitable. I negotiated the contracts, modernized the systems, updated everything from the payroll structure to the client portal, and he barely noticed. Now that it was gone, he was finally realizing how much of it was me. She stood up slowly. I'll tell him, she said. But just remember he's your father. I haven't forgotten, I said. He did. She left quietly, and that night, as I sat at home eating takeout alone, I knew he was sitting at the head of the table in that old house, waiting for me to walk in and save him from himself. But I never showed up, and he never apologized. The next morning, I found out he tried to break into the office after hours. He still had his keys, and the outer doors weren't changed yet. But when he got to the server room and realized his code didn't work, he lost it. Security called me at 2 to 1 a.m., said he was pounding on the door, demanding access. Greg had to drive down and talk him off the ledge. He didn't leave until nearly 4. The first thing I did that morning was order the locks changed, physical ones this time. Then I sent a message to the board. It was short, just a formal notice that I had assumed full control of operations effective immediately. There would be no disruptions in payroll, no changes in client delivery, and no decisions made in haste. I made it clear that I wasn't acting emotionally. I was protecting the company. Surprisingly, no one pushed back. A few asked if I was okay. One board member wrote back and said, "Honestly, about time." The gossip started right after. I heard through 3 different people that my Aunt Sharon was furious, but not at me. For once she was mad at him. Apparently, she told him, "You made your own son hate you. That's not Wilma's failure. That's yours." It didn't stop there. My cousin Janie, who never said a bad word about anyone, told my mom that watching Dad that night felt like watching someone kick a dog that just brought you a gift. That was new. Usually, they all just tiptoed around him. Now they were talking. I knew he'd take it badly, but I didn't expect him to go for revenge. It started small. He went around to our old suppliers and started spreading rumors that I was cutting costs, letting go of people, preparing to liquidate. One of them, someone I'd known since I was a teenager, called to warn me. I responded by pulling every contract he had ever signed and replacing the vendors he brought in over the years. I streamlined our partnerships, consolidated logistics, and in 2 weeks, I actually increased revenue. That's when he tried something bigger. He called his lawyer. That part actually made me nervous. I sat with our legal team, went through everything line by line, but it was airtight. The transfers were all valid. The ownership trail was clean. My control was legal. His role had been symbolic for years. He just never realized it. The lawyer sent a letter. I sent one back. 3 days later, he stopped showing up at the office entirely, but he didn't stop calling my mom or yelling. And then I took the car. It wasn't petty. The Lexus was company-owned, registered under the business. I had the plates pulled and the access key remotely deactivated. When he tried to drive it the next morning, it didn't start. He had to call a tow truck to get it home. He called me 14 times that day. I didn't answer a single one. That night, my mom sent one message. He's sitting in the garage, just staring at it, like it's going to come back to life. And the best part, everyone knew it was his own fault. The morning after I disabled the Lexus, my mom called, sounding like she hadn't slept. "He's gone." What does that mean? He left early this morning, packed a duffel bag, didn't tell me where he was going, just said he needed air. My father, the man who once refused to leave a wedding early because he had to finish his wine, had just walked out of his own house without a plan. Or maybe he had one. Maybe it just didn't include her anymore. I figured he'd be back by the evening. He wasn't. Then things started getting strange. That afternoon, a man in a cheap suit showed up at the office, asked for me by name, said he was conducting an independent financial inquiry on behalf of a former executive. He didn't even have a proper badge, just a printed business card with a fake-looking email address. I asked him if he knew what a restraining order was, and Greg escorted him out. But that wasn't the weirdest part. At 5:14 p.m., I got a message from a banker I knew from one of our corporate accounts. Apparently, my dad had walked into a branch uptown, claimed he was the founder and CEO of our company, and tried to take out a loan under the original business name, the one I had legally dissolved and absorbed months ago. The application was flagged instantly. They called me to verify, and I told them flat out, that entity doesn't exist. His name was nowhere in the new ownership. In fact, the form he filled out could technically be considered attempted fraud. That was the moment the wind really shifted. By the next morning, the board knew. Word traveled fast, but not just through official channels. Janie texted me a screenshot of a Facebook post from Sharon, vague and dramatic. "Some people don't know how to retire gracefully." I missed that was directed at him, no doubt. Calls started rolling in, not from angry relatives, but from people who were shocked, disappointed, and weirdly supportive. Sharon actually told my mom during a phone call that she couldn't believe how ungrateful he was, that one nearly made me fall out of my chair. But the part no one saw coming was my mom. She left. She packed 2 bags, took her car, and drove to Albany to stay with her sister. Didn't even say goodbye to him. Just left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "I'm tired of covering for you. Maybe now you'll hear the silence. She called me a few hours later from her sister's place. Said she needed space. Said she didn't know what she'd been doing all these years. Said it was never about business, Wilma. It was about control. Everything with your father always was. I stayed quiet. I think she took that as agreement. Maybe it was. While she was gone, he went into full panic mode. Not that he called me, of course. No, he just started scrambling behind the scenes. I got a call from our biggest logistics vendor saying he'd shown up unannounced, trying to confirm they still honored his terms. They didn't. Security had to walk him out. He even tried calling a few of the old clients, the ones who liked him, except now they were calling me, confused, embarrassed for him. Then came the real blow. He had his lawyer file a petition to contest the business transfer. Tried to claim I had manipulated him into signing over authority, claimed he wasn't mentally sound at the time. That part was ironic. But they filed the petition under the wrong corporate name again, and this time the court flagged it not just as an error, but as deliberate misrepresentation, which triggered an automatic compliance review with the bank. And because his last personal business account was still loosely tied to one of the frozen entities, the bank locked it down. He lost access to what little money he had left in the business. In less than 4 weeks, he had gone from patriarch to ghost. No company, no car, no control, no wife, and still he didn't call. Not to explain, not to ask, not even to yell. It wasn't pride anymore. It was something worse. He was unraveling. It had been 5 days since my mother left, and my dad still hadn't reached out, not once, no text, no call, not even a third-party messenger pretending to be checking in, and that told me everything. I knew him. If he was quiet, it meant he was planning something, or trying to figure out how to spin the collapse into a version of the story where he was still the victim. But there wasn't much left to spin. The car was gone, the accounts frozen, and the lawyer who filed that laughable petition had quietly dropped him as a client. Word was the firm didn't want to deal with a former executive who couldn't even produce ownership documentation for the company he claimed to run. And now, without my mom around to soften the blow, the silence in that house must have been unbearable. Still, I wasn't expecting what happened next. At 6:43 p.m., I got a message from an old family friend named Mike, someone who always admired my dad, one of his few loyal defenders. "Hey, you free to talk? I just left your parents' place. Your dad's not doing great." I called him. He told me my father had invited him over for dinner, probably hoping to get a sympathetic ear, but the conversation turned strange. At one point, my dad started blaming me for ruining his name, but then quickly shifted to claiming he let me run things to teach me responsibility. Then in the same breath, he said I had stolen the company. "I don't think he knows what he believes anymore," Mike said. I wasn't surprised. He'd spent so long building a world where he was the only one who mattered, the only one who was right, and now when no one listened, he didn't know who to be. But the worst part was still coming. My mom called the next morning. She sounded colder than I'd ever heard her. "I came home to pick up a few things," she said. I found him sitting on the couch watching reruns with the blinds shut. Same clothes from 3 days ago. The house smells like stale beer. I didn't say anything. I told him I was staying another week with my sister. He just nodded. Said, "Do what you want. Everyone else does." That line stuck with me, not because I felt bad for him, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected all along. He still didn't see it. Still thought this was something being done to him, not something he'd created. Later that evening, she sent me a photo. It was the office wall at home, the one covered in old newspaper clippings, business awards, framed articles about the company. All of it had been taken down. The wall was bare. Underneath, on the floor, was a box labeled storage, and inside it, tossed like old receipts, was the custom watch I had given him, still in the box. That was the last thread for me. I called the company's legal department and had the final paperwork filed. The pension plan he'd always counted on, the one tied to his executive emeritus role, was formally revoked. Legally, it had been conditional on active participation and cooperative transition, and he had violated every clause. He was now entirely severed. The next morning, Sharon texted me out of nowhere, a screenshot. It was a group chat with 4 of my cousins. They were dragging my dad's name through the dirt, saying he'd finally got what he gave, calling him out for years of control, manipulation, ego. People who never took my side were suddenly rewriting the entire family narrative like it had always been obvious. Funny how quick people turn when the power shifts. But one message stood out from Janie. Honestly, I hope he finally realizes what he lost. I didn't reply because I knew he wouldn't. He never had before, and time wasn't going to change that. I thought the silence was going to last forever, but then, 10 days after I filed the final pension revocation, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was him. I let it ring. I wasn't ready. Not because I didn't know what I'd say, but because I already knew what he wouldn't. No apology. Sure enough, an hour later, I got a voicemail. His voice was quieter than usual, slower, like he was trying to disguise how shaken he was. Wilma, I think we should talk, man to man. Let's just sit down. I want to make things right. I played it twice, then a third time. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. Not even close. I never called back. The next day, my mom showed up at my apartment. She looked tired, suitcase in one hand, jacket slung over the other arm. I need a place to stay, she said, just for a night or two. I can't take it anymore. She sat on the couch like she'd been holding her breath for a month, said he'd been moping around the house, watching TV at 3:00 a.m., trying to call clients, ranting to no one, said he kept bringing up the car, the money, the business, circling back over and over, but never once asking why or admitting anything. He keeps saying he just wants you to come to the house, says everything can go back to how it was. I laughed once, not because it was funny. She leaned back, looked at the ceiling. He's still hoping you'll show up, that if he just waits long enough you'll do the fixing for him. I didn't answer. She already knew I wouldn't. She stayed with me for a few days. By the 4th day, she was opening up more than I'd ever seen, said things she used to only hint at. I always thought if I kept things calm it would balance out his storms, but it never did. He just got comfortable making a mess, knowing I'd sweep it up. On the last night, she said something that stuck. You know, he's not going to change. Even if he loses everything, he'll still find a way to convince himself someone else is to blame. And she was right, because 2 weeks later, his lawyer made one last attempt, claimed I had taken the car illegally. We sent over the title paperwork, the company ownership log, the insurance documents, all in my name. The response was short. No legal standing. That was the end of it, officially. Unsurprisingly, the lawyer dropped him after that. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he started riding the bus. The man who once told me real men don't take public transportation was now walking 4 blocks to catch the 27 downtown. I pictured him standing there, fuming quietly while pretending he wasn't. The house, it was starting to fall apart again. No one was maintaining it. Pipes leaking, paint chipping, bills piling up. I offered nothing. The business was thriving. Profits were up. The staff was happier, and 3 former clients returned the moment they heard he was out for good. One afternoon I ran into Sharon at the grocery store. She hugged me for the first time in years. No sarcasm, no passive-aggressive comments, just a quiet, sincere hug. Sometimes, she said, people have to lose everything before they realize what they had. I nodded but didn't respond because I wasn't sure he ever would. He built a kingdom but ruled it like a tyrant, and when the walls came down, there was no one left to stand with him. Not even the people who used to pretend he was right. Not even me.